From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We begin in Argentina, where a landmark vote on a bill to legalize abortion during the first 14 weeks of pregnancy is taking place in the lower house of Congress. The bill has divided President Mauricio Macri's government and sparked huge demonstrations for and against in the Catholic nation. Argentina currently permits abortion in specific cases, and central to the debate is whether abortion in the early stages of pregnancy should be provided for free. If the bill succeeds, Argentina will become the largest country in Latin America to allow abortion. Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Edgardo Esteban, brings us more.
There is a lot of expectation on the debate over free, safe and legal abortion that is happening in the lower house. The outcome of the vote will probably be known on Thursday morning. The debate is expected to last about 20 hours. Legislators signed up to give their positions regarding the bill. 500,000 women die every year from unsafe abortions in Argentina. This is a historic event because it's the first time that an abortion bill gets to the lower house. That is why people are outside the Congress awaiting the decision about this bill for free, safe and legal abortion.
That was Edgardo Esteban from Buenos Aires. Staying in Argentina, prisoners are demanding what they categorize as an indispensable right: a TV to watch Argentina's World Cup matches. Prisoners at the Puerto Madryn prison in Chubut are going on a hunger strike until authorities fix the television signal inside the prison as the Russia World Cup approaches. The inmates were denied a habeas corpus request, which they presented in a letter published by authorities to demand their rights inside the prison. Lawyers say inmates haven't lost their right to entertainment, so they are entitled to a TV and not just for the World Cup. The campaign by opposition groups in Nicaragua to remove President Daniel Ortega continues, with a call for a 24-hour national strike on Thursday. Businessmen, students, and other groups say they want this strike to contribute to a peaceful solution to the political crisis in the country. Several workers' unions are opposing the stoppage. Nicaragua's bishops have called for a new round of dialogue for Friday. The strike call comes as violence by some opposition groups against Sandinista activists and the police killed at least 3 people on Tuesday. The worst affected area was Jinotepe, where armed opposition supporters ransacked a teaching hospital and kidnapped students. A civilian was also shot dead in Managua as he helped police remove debris used to set up roadblocks. Violence in Nicaragua continues to be carried out by supporters of the opposition, but despite the uncertainty, residents are organizing locally and showing resilience. For an on-the-ground view on this, we spoke via phone to University Michigan research fellow Ben Savio. He is based in Managua.
Well, you know, the Sandinista Front is made up of hundreds of thousands of people. In the last election, they won 1,800,000 votes to 600,000 votes if you add up all the opposition candidates. So they really do have an advantage in terms of people. Obviously, there's been some damage done to their overall reputation, but the organized base of the Sandinista movement has a lot of political capacity, a lot of experience. It's lived through war in the past, so it's showing a lot of restraint, a real desire to build dialogue, a real desire to build understanding, a real desire to transform the democracy, if that's the need, right? But not to do it through violence, to do it through negotiation, to do it through dialogue. And, well, there's all kinds of local organizing happening. The popular economy continues to function, so we haven't seen food prices shoot up like we have in other countries, despite the fact that transportation is very, very difficult. So that aspect helps, the fact that there's so many people who live off of the popular economy and their day-to-day survival depends on them being able to get food to markets. And also people have organized, workers have organized, for example, in the free trade zones, which are obviously exploitative areas, but if people need those jobs. If they don't have them, they enter into very dire situations of poverty. And the Guarimba violence has taken over some of these factories and shut them down using arms. So the workers show up with a baseball bat, and when the Guarimbas show up, hundreds of workers come out ready to fight, and that they've been able to maintain their jobs that way. And really, people have sort of armed themselves in a very unconventional way, right? With machetes, with baseball bats, and are talking all the time, communicating, trying to make sure everybody's okay, and trying to travel as little as possible, trying to avoid conflict as much as possible. But it's tense.
Author, labor and human rights attorney Dan Kovalik has written extensively on Nicaragua and has been visited the country dating back to the 1980s. He joins us now. Hello, Dan. Thank you for your time to talk to us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So what do you see as being behind the violence that we are witnessing right now in Nicaragua?
Well, look, first of all, the protests started over pretty modest Social Security reforms that Daniel Ortega had announced. Frankly, a lot less drastic than what the business community wanted. And then it seems to me that the peaceful protest against these reforms were hijacked by violent actors who, it seems to me, are being funded by the National Endowment for Democracy in the United States. And they've carried out a lot of violence. Certainly, it seems that, security forces on the government side reacted as well, maybe overreacted at times. But it seems to me that what we're seeing is a very well orchestrated coup against the, frankly, very popular Sandinista government.
So do you believe the Sandinista government and Ortega continue to have the support of the people, or is it weakening?
Well, so first of all, let's look at some context. I mean, in October of 2017, just several months ago, before all this violence, Daniel Ortega had almost 80% approval rating, which is incredible. Obviously, what's happened in recent months has tarnished the government somewhat, and in part because they haven't reacted enough to stop the violence that some of the more violent opposition is creating. But I think ultimately, people are realizing that this violence is being committed by forces that want to overthrow the government, and I think people will rally around the Sandinistas and Daniel Ortega.
And what do you believe all of this plays out with the sanctions recently announced by the United States against government officials?
Well, look, the U.S. has been gunning for this government for a long time, as we know. Let's remember the Contra War, the 1980s, which was brutal, that the U.S. sponsored. 50,000 Nicaraguans died in the process. That's equivalent to 2.5 million Americans if there was a similar war here. And ever since, the U.S. has not forgiven the Sandinistas for overthrowing the U.S.-backed dictator, Anastasio Somoza. And the current sanctions, frankly, are flowing from that animosity. And even last year, before any of this violence, the U.S. House of Representatives approved the NICA Act, which would cut Nicaragua off from all international loans and support, which Nicaragua desperately needs. So that is what this is about. The sanctions that are now being imposed have nothing about supporting democracy, because the U.S. doesn't care about democracy in Nicaragua. It never has. It has everything to do with trying to punish Nicaragua for overthrowing a U.S.-backed dictator.
Thank you very much, Dan, for your time.
Thank you.
So we're coming to this story in Nicaragua in a few minutes and throughout the week. So we'll take a short break now, but join us again after this video from our multimedia team. Welcome back. The Venezuelan government has granted legal benefits to 43 additional people detained for causing political violence. This extension of benefits to people accused of political violence began on June 1st. The Truth Commission has now benefited 79 people who were detained for offenses committed during the years 2013, 14, and 17. National Constituent Assembly President Delcy Rodriguez said that legal benefits bring a message of peace into the process of reconciliation.
These legal measures required by President Nicolás Maduro have a peace message. You are going to be reunited with your families and friends. This is a new opportunity to build peace and be united.
For more on this story, we go to our correspondent Esther Yáñez in Caracas.
Good afternoon. A third round has taken place wherein benefits have been extended to those who committed acts of political violence. This time, 43 persons have benefited. This meeting took place in the Casa Amarilla, in the center of Caracas, with the Peace, Truth, and Justice Commission. Delcy Rodriguez has spoken following the meeting, just as she did in previous times. She spoke of the uniting and meeting of the Venezuelan people, a message at the behest of President Nicolás Maduro. We should remember that on May 24th, he asked that these benefits be granted. All of this in the interest of national dialogue for the reconciliation in the country. Delcy Rodriguez also said that the coups and conspiring against the institutional order remain in the past because we are sending a message of peace from a place of diversity, but always with respect. Rodriguez said we have all of the pacifist channels to practice politics. Violence will never be the way. This has been without a doubt the most repeated message in the morning here at the Casa Amarilla. In other cases where these benefits were granted, there were also guarantors present to ensure that violent political episodes will never take place again. Among the guarantors, there were opposition governors from 3 different Venezuelan states, as well as the Attorney General, Tarek William Saab, the Ombudsman, Alfredo Ruiz, and some representatives of political parties, such as the president of COPE, Pedro Pablo Fernandez, were also present. All of them have acknowledged the common work between the executive branch, the judicial branch, the public ministry, and the citizens' power. The public officials and guarantors present made recognition to the victim committee that in the interests of peace, we're extending all of these benefits for the country's reconciliation. An important statement from Delcy Rodriguez said that with this third benefit session, the work of the Truth Commission has culminated in the interests of justice and in the interests of national dialogue.
Colombia's presidential candidates have secured their political alliances 4 days ahead of the second round of elections. Our correspondent Tatiana Portela has more from the city of Bogotá.
The second round of elections in Colombia will be held on June 17th. Presidential candidates Iván Duque and Gustavo Petro have already secured their political alliances. Iván Duque, the right-wing candidate of the Democratic Center Party, secured an alliance with politicians, including Congresswoman Clara Rojas of the Liberal Party and former presidential candidate Ingrid Betancourt. People on social media reacted to this candidacy by saying it's impossible for a person who was a victim of the armed conflict to support a presidential campaign aimed at revising the peace accords. Analysts say, in fact, that the peace agreements could be completely ruined, and this would not only question the legitimacy of the government, but would also lead to the sharpening of a new conflict in the country. On the other hand, Petro secured the political alliance for a pro-peace coalition. The Democratic Party and the Alianza Verde Party united in this presidential campaign. In the last few hours, presidential candidate Roy Barrera also joined the campaign. This alliance is important because, although not sought by Petro, it respects the accords between the government of Juan Manuel Santos and the FARC. This is why Barrera joined, because he believes this campaign will aim at achieving peace in Colombia and will work for the peace accords to be implemented.
That was Tatiana Portela from Bogotá. Gustavo Bell, the head of the Colombian government delegation in talks with the National Liberation Army, ELN, said they have a strong determination to achieve a peace agreement. Bale made this statement after it was announced that the dialogue between the two parties will be extended until June 15. He hopes to settle on a concrete agenda before the cycle of talks ends, so the next Colombian government can follow a clear path towards a peace agreement. At the same time, the ELN has announced a ceasefire to facilitate voter participation in the second round of the presidential election on Sunday. The Colombian army has captured the brother of Guacho, a former member of the FARC who drifted before the peace process began. Juan Gabriel Arizala has been arrested and is wanted by Ecuador and Colombia due to his connections to violent acts in the border.
He was in charge of managing the district's militias of La Guayacana, Llorente, and Tumaco. And the same way he is direct contact of this criminal structure, Oliver Sinisterra, with their leader, alias Guacho.
The emergency at the Hidroituango Dam in Colombia continues. Families have remained away from their homes for a month and are now at a risk of a possible collapse of the dam.
Communities affected by the Hidroituango Dam traveled to Bogotá to demand truth, justice, and reparations from the state.
We came all this way because even though government officials have come to our lands, they have never met with us. We feel abandoned. They are ignoring those affected by this.
Communities feel that they've been left behind by the state and suspect that the Office of Public Services has been hiding information.
The information being released by the public services only hides the truth. We believe that if the dam were to fall, the risk will be much higher than they anticipate. We need them to drain the water, because while they say there's only been one collapse, we have counted 15.
Beyond a humanitarian tragedy, this case has become a political issue for social leaders.
We have been live from the start. The engineers didn't know this could happen, and now they have us huddled under tents. This is a big disaster, and we don't know what will happen next. They're all terrified to return to the site.
Besides the lack of information, there are also issues with what's happening at the shelters.
Those of us upstream have yet to receive any aid. No food, no hygienic products, no diapers, not even shelters. Downstream, we know the food has been precarious. Sometimes it's rotten, and that's when they get any food.
Legal measures are being prepared in the face of government inaction.
We have asked the dam's environmental license to be overturned, and yet the Council of State has denied cautionary measures. We will continue to make our demands to protect the affected communities.
Another issue raised by locals is the pressure being exerted on them to stop talking to media representatives who travel to their communities. Communities are asking that the government dismantle the dam so that inhabitants of the area can live in peace.
Haiti's government has announced it is withdrawing Oxfam Great Britain's right to operate in the Caribbean country after allegations of sexual misconduct by some of the charity's staff. In a statement, 3 ministries, including the Planning and External Cooperation Ministry, said they were withdrawing Oxfam Great Britain's status as a non-governmental organization for violation of Haitian law and serious violation of the principle of the dignity of the human beings. Cuban Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs Rogelio Sierra Díaz is in Guyana as part of his tour of the Caribbean. Sierra Díaz met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Guyana and Ambassador Audrey Jardine Waddell. As part of his visit, he also met with Cuban doctors and teachers living in Guyana, and he praised their work in the country. In Grenada, the government is ready to open its new parliament building. Government officials announced the new building will open on June 21st. They're inviting the public and leaders from around the Caribbean to witness the event. There was a slight delay with the opening due to a setback in electronic equipment from a contracted supplier. The May 21 date coincides with exactly 100 days since Prime Minister Dr. Keith Mitchell was re-elected. Bolivian President Evo Morales met with Russian President Vladimir Putin. During his visit to Moscow, Morales held a press conference in which he talked about the political situation in Latin America and the attacks on leftist governments.
Su delito de Lula es haber sido candidato Lula's crime was leading the polls this year. I read that a judge said, "I don't have any evidence, but I do have convictions." Yesterday I read in a newspaper, Lula's freedom is conditional. If Lula wasn't a candidate, he would be free. Like this, we can go from president to president or former presidents who have been left-wing. And when they are not able to overthrow the governments, they do conspire around the economy or threaten with the military, like in Venezuela or Nicaragua.
The UN General Assembly has adopted a resolution on protection of the Palestinian civilian population. With a vote of 120 countries in favor, 8 against, and 45 abstentions. The resolution calls for, quote, renewed and urgent efforts to create the conditions necessary to launch negotiations to achieve an end to the Israeli occupation that began in 1967. The resolution also says that the UN General Assembly deplores the use of excessive and indiscriminate force by the Israeli forces against Palestinian civilians, including the use of live ammunition against civilian protesters, as children, and as well as medical personnel and journalists, and expresses its concern at the loss of innocent lives. A video showing French President Emmanuel Macron calling for welfare payments to be slashed has been released.
I'll spell out where we're at, that we're piling too much cash into the welfare system, we're taking accountability away from people, and we're focusing on corrective treatment. Look where we are on welfare. We plow crazy amounts of cash into subsistence benefit, and people are still poor. There's no way out. People who are born poor, stay poor. People who fall into poverty, stay poor.
The clip is causing considerable controversy in France. Macron's opponents and left-wing voters, who paint the 40-year-old as a neoliberal, have said this is a further reminder that Macron is a president of the rich who talks down to the poor. Macron was elected a year ago with a mandate to open up the economy and create a more effective welfare system. But there is simmering discontent on the left of his centrist party, where his policies are seen as favoring the wealthy. Muslims across the world get ready for the celebration of Eid al-Fitr, a religious holiday that marks the end of Ramadan. Eid al-Fitr translates from Arabic as the festival of breaking the fast, taken by Muslims during the holy month of Ramadan. It is a day of celebration with families and friends, but it also includes prayers and charity towards the poor. In Pakistan, the Muslim community is already shopping for henna and jewelry that they will put on to celebrate the achievement of fasting from dawn until dusk during a month. Peruvian authorities will return 27 Galapagos turtles to Ecuador after they were rescued more than a year ago on board a bus in the northern region of Piura. In April 2017, Peruvian police rescued the turtles, a highly endangered species, from a group of traffickers trying to take them to Europe. The turtles from Ecuador's Galapagos Islands were found in a cardboard box in a bus traveling from northern Peru to Lima. According to CERFOR, the wildlife agency said 29 turtles were found, but 2 had died due to the poor conditions on the trip. And just before we go, a reminder of our special World Cup program with Diego Armando Maradona. De la mano del 10, the World Cup, according to Maradona, will air only on Telesur every night throughout the World Cup in Russia. It starts tonight, so be sure to tune in. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and other stories, you can find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And be sure to also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.